the question is addressed to whichever team, both teams will have the chance to answer. Are you ready? Okay, first question. Could Douglas please provide a specific citation for the case that you mentioned about the 21 school children killed?
The school was Sandy Hook. It happened, I think, in 1992. The person was a guy named 2002, and the radio person was Alex Jones. And he had a huge radio, huge online, a huge YouTube. It's called InfoWars, and he published all kinds of things accusing those parents that attacked him of that they were actors, and it really did. All his millions of followers chased after them and made their lives terrible. But you can check, InfoWars, Alex Jones, Sandy Hook. It was one of the most horrible events in the US. And he used it to gain viewers and become famous and sell things in his online store.
So back to the misinformation. When the Frontier Alliance of Doctors in the United States started finding a very cheap medicine that was very effective to protect against getting COVID and against treating COVID, they had a huge following that started using this drug called ivermectin. It was Nobel Prize winning. There's 30 billion people, 3 billion people that have already taken this medicine. So, this FDA stepped in and said, this is not approved for this usage, and they highly discouraged it. But there are countries who could not afford the expensive vaccines from the United States and the UK and other countries, and they started implementing the...
Could Team B's provide a way for citizens to protect themselves from misinformation, since you keep saying government shouldn't protect citizens?
Well, journalism is the fourth pillar of democracy, and what it does is serves to check and balance what the government does to hold it accountable. So it's very important that we do not give the freedom of speech, the right to freedom of speech to the government, because then it can control. Once it can control and decide what is misinformation or not, then it can use to serve its agenda. Like I mentioned in my earlier debate, that some TV stations, they can angle the story and to...
So let's just correct about the ivermectin. But what did CNN call it? They called it horse medicine. Fake news, fake information. Yes, you're right, Lester, it was. But who should regulate the fake news from CNN? Should now Joe Rogan, who was accused of taking horse medicine, does he have the right to sue CNN? Of course he does. Because that is how the government protects us from misinformation. They give us access to courts when the media lies about us. Nick Sandman was called a racist. He sued CNN for $100 million thereabouts, and he won. Why? Because libel laws protect us from misinformation and gives the ordinary citizen recourse to the law. To say the government shouldn't protect us means that the media can lie and we cannot go after the media.
The affirmative argues they stand not for dictatorship, but for basic level of common sense safeguards. Question: how to and who should define what is basic?
No, not him. One of them.
I think in an open democracy like Taiwan, we actually do a pretty good job. We have referendums. That is where the people get to speak. The people get to speak in referendums. That is what democracy is. That is what freedom of speech allows. It allows the government to bring up things and allows the people to have a voice. It doesn't say that the government says what is true or what is false. It says the government protects us from misinformation. And I'll speak about that a little bit later. But the point is, we're not saying the government just like controls all the newspapers. Of course not. We believe in the freedom of press. But what does common sense mean? It means that the people get a voice in their government. I've long believed that people get the government they deserve, the government they elect. And a group of people who are common.
Don't forget the issue of misinformation and confuse it with our general laws, criminal laws, the financial laws, the police. This is part of normal society. We are talking about the misinformation that the government can label, that you cannot say something that is labeled as misinformation, but they are the judges. So when we give up this freedom, it's a slippery slope, because once government has that power, they will not want to give it back to you. So be aware. Do not confuse the issues. We believe in free press, like Victoria is saying, to protect the public, to dig up the misinformation.
Could Team Beast provide a way for citizens to protect themselves from misinformation, since you keep saying government shouldn't protect citizens?
Let's do that one.
Didn't this last one answer that one?
I will answer that. In North Korea, I have the best education. I teach her everything. Come on, are you serious? Look, we gotta start educating the people to have critical thinking skills. They need to understand what is right and what is wrong. And we need to continue to do that so we can think better. What are some tools that we could use? The free internet that is non-censored by the government. That is open so that you can, with the critical thinking skills that you have, that you've learned from your family, from education, and be able to make those decisions yourself. Not let some governments, maybe 90% of the decisions.
They don't really have an answer to that question, do they? Because they say, all right, let's trust the media. Where do we get the media? We all look at the same ones. And those media outlets are controlled by a small group of people. People who are there to make money. And if you think the owners of those companies wouldn't mislead you to make more money, well, I got a bridge to sell you in Brooklyn. Because of course they will. There has to be something whose interest is only to protect the people. And that is the government of the people, who is there as our representatives.
Could Team Lava share more about their thinking on the limits of government protection, since you agree that the government should protect the citizens?
Just like what I said in my presentation, in the last 20 years, there are so many phone scams happen. Taiwan is actually the most advanced to attack those scammers. And because our government has already built a strong and powerful central system for investigation, like the 165, the calling hotline. Once you are fell into scam like Eric, you can call and the government will protect you. This is how our government protects us in a very solid way.
The limits of disinformation. As a US citizen, I feel seriously in the past few years that the freedom limitations of speech, because in general, you see when Biden went to the social media companies and the press, they said you should crack down on the misinformation of various voices regarding the vaccines and COVID. And all of a sudden you see people that have PhDs and have co-authored many peer-reviewed studies, credible people being muted online because of the encouragement of the US government.
Both fake news and partial fact mislead the public opinion. Does partial fact be considered misinformation and should be censored as well?
Kim Jong-un I think he's done, okay? For now. Partial facts. Here's the thing. Governments might not make 100% fully agendaed, fully biased, dictatorships. Of course, those kind of governments will censor everything. However, do you really trust the government enough to make the right decisions every time? And is your voice heard as a citizen 100% of the time? They, once elected into office, for the 4 years, 2 years, whatever term it is, they will make the decision for you. And guess who whispers in their ear? Lobbyists, people who have other agendas. Governments are not...
Go. Daniel, go.
Could you say the question again? Just answer whatever.
We agree with you. The press is corrupt. The government is corrupt. Big companies are corrupt. We agree. But where do most of the people have their voice in a democratically elected government? In the government, they can vote, like in Taiwan. In America right now, one of the biggest controversies is critical race theory. Critical race theory. And yes, the parents can go to the board meetings and raise their complaints and raise their concerns. In a democracy, we can stand on the streets and we can protest. We are not talking about the suppression of truth, the suppression of information. We are saying the government needs to protect us from misinformation. That's it. And they already do in so many ways. Like, they protect our kids from...
How would government protect misinformation instead of controlling IT companies to manipulate people's mindsets? For example, American election.
So there are examples of handling this difficult question. In the US, they have a whole thing of how to regulate TV, cable news, radio. So what they do is they create a part of the government that is the experts in it. It's people who aren't there. They're not subject to trying to win the next election. They're there for the people and they're experts in their area, and they will look and say, what is the most effective, fair balance? They're not there, put there by lobbyists. They don't have to worry about taking care of certain companies. They say, I'm here as an American in that thing, and I say, let me try and make the best decision.
Having worked in the blockchain industry for the last 5 years, I can tell you, the world is moving towards a Web 3.0 industry. What is Web 3.0? It is a decentralized. There is no centralization of information. It gives the internet and information back to the hands of the people to decide what information is good and what information is bad. You guys decide. Why are we doing that? Why is Web 2.0 moving towards Web 3.0? Because companies and governments are in control of Web 2.0. And this is why technology is more moving towards decentralization.
Could Eric from Team Beauty and the Beast clarify his position on whether he is for or against government protection of its citizens from misinformation?
I apologize. Isn't it our turn to go first?
No, we did that the last time.
Minus 1 point. Kim Jong-un is, of course, for censorship of information. It's about us protecting, us deciding. But Eric is for you. I understand that it's really important for you guys to think for yourselves. There's so much tools and so much information out there that once we have our own, we all have different agendas, different thinking, what is good for us. What's good for me might not be good for you. So that's why it's important for you guys to decide.
I want to go back to Eric's previous point. I work for Web 3.0. I work for blockchain. If you look at an article in The Atlantic published in 2019 where they interviewed a bunch of tech experts, they found the #1 cause of polarization of people starting to hate each other in the United States were information bots. Not people typing information, but bots sent through Twitter to deliberately polarize information. The decentralization of information, which is what Eric is arguing for. He's saying decentralize everything, let everybody believe everything, doesn't matter what, doesn't matter if those kids really were killed, they're not actors, they really were killed, doesn't matter that
When misinformation results in damage or death, who is held responsible? Without government monitoring for misinformation, is accountability possible?
We are saying government should set proper principles and standards to communicate to public, because ordinary citizens may not have enough time and resources to analyze everything that we got. So, just like Eric said, we are not arguing that government should decide what is good for you or what is bad for you. We are saying government should set standards for everybody, because ordinary people may not have professional knowledge about everything, and it is not efficient, and it is not effective.
Accountability for misinformation. This is where you will find that China will never admit their role in the rapid spread of COVID. China is responsible, but when they control the information, they will squelch anybody in China that is trying to report that something started in China. So it's up to the journalists and investigators in the free world to uncover what China will not let, the news that they will not let out. So that is why it is important that you do not let the government control the misinformation when they have the keys themselves and they are the guilty ones. There's the prime example of the abuse of power.
Let's give both teams a big round of applause.